Hey everybody, welcome. This is the first episode of the Team Talley podcast. Most of you, some of you maybe know me already. Mike Kirkland. This is my wife Stephanie, over there. Here we go. So, I guess let's just start with some background.
Sure.
So, a little over a year ago, we had a daughter that was born prematurely. She was born 15 weeks early and spent the first 89 days in the NICU unit. And it's just been an interesting challenge since then. And it's really hard to find a lot of parenting resources, especially once you're out of the hospital, when you get the baby home. So we really just wanted to share some of our experiences and challenges, not just on her part, but for us too.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that Mike had the thought to do this is because I have looked on Facebook and other areas for Facebook groups or support groups to talk to people about our experiences after NICU. There's plenty of NICU groups that were great resources for me the first 3 months we were in the NICU with all the struggles we had. But now that we are a year out of the NICU and we're getting past the major hobbles that we had, we didn't find any resources of people to really talk to or get advice from following our time. And so I guess this first episode we could just kind of tell you what happened with the birth of Talley and where we ended and where we are now, and then we can go from there.
Yeah.
So May 11th, 2021, I had a normal day. Towards the end of the day, was telling my coworkers that things were not feeling normal. I was just tired. I thought maybe I had a stomach bug. And then by the time I got home and picked up the kids from my parents' house, we had Chick-fil-A. I told my mom I wanted to go home and just go to bed. I wasn't feeling well. And leading up to that, I got our son in bed, and that's when I assumed the contractions started. I told Mike, he was working, that I was just having some pains. I took some Tylenol. I had called the OB line at the hospital, the birthing center, and they told me just to get in contact with my OB the next day. Well, the pain just kept coming stronger and more frequent, and nothing was helping me. And by the time Mike got off by, I think, 1 a.m., I was in excruciating pain, and I could not wait any longer. So Mike went and got my mom, and she came and stayed with our 2 older children, and we went to the hospital. And to our surprise, I was dilated to a 6, I believe, 7 maybe, 90% effaced. And
I think 6 sounds right.
The first time I was checked by the nurse that came in, she had told me she could feel a hand. And of course, I'm only 25 weeks pregnant. I'm in complete shock. We had an ultrasound the week before with no signs of any type of issues. And it's just all happening really, really quickly. So this was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. They called my OB in, and they got us a spot at Children's. We were sent by ambulance from St. Anthony's to Children's Hospital, and we were told we would go to a room, we'd be evaluated, and then they would go from there. Well, we did not go from a room. We went straight to the OR. They got a little bit of my back history, and the next thing I knew, I was under, and they delivered our baby Talley. And Mike, he wasn't even allowed to ride in the ambulance with me. I don't know if it was because of COVID or what the reasons were. So he had no idea we were going straight to the OR. He had no idea we were getting ready to have our baby.
I followed the ambulance in my truck and went in through the ER. And by the time I got up there, she was already in the operating room. So
Right.
it was probably hour, maybe a little longer before I got an update. Find out, is she okay? Is the baby okay? What's even going on? By now it's like 3:30 in the morning.
Well, I deliver at 5, so.
Yeah. So they finally got me an update. They took the baby upstairs to get her on a ventilator, and I didn't get to see Stephanie for several hours. And I did get to go up and see the baby. I got to see Talley briefly while they were getting her intubated. So it was all a whirlwind for me at that point.
Yeah, and then I don't know what time it was that I woke up from my anesthesia, but they had told me we could go see the baby, and then they told me that I needed the anesthesia to wear off, so they prolonged it, and they told me that we have to get you in a regular room, and they just kept giving us reasons and reasons and reasons to why we couldn't go see the baby yet. And I think now maybe by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon they allowed us to go to the NICU to see our baby for the first time. I don't know if in the meantime Tally was struggling or what exactly the delay was for us to see her, but it was just us waiting to go see our baby. We didn't have any type of normal delivery or birth like we did our first son. It was just such a whirlwind, and to this day they have no reasons why she came early. The best they can tell us is that I had maybe an infection that passed over to the placenta and went to her. So by I'm not sure the time, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she was delivered at 5 a.m. They allowed Mike and I to go to the NICU and finally see our precious baby. She was delivered at 5 a.m. She weighed 2 pounds. I don't remember the exact length. I think 13 inches. Something in that range. They were very, very actually pleased with her weight being 15 and a half weeks early and weighing 2 pounds. They were happy with that. They didn't know what was wrong with her. They were giving her tons of antibiotics, and of course she was on the ventilator, the regular ventilator, and the I can't remember what the other ventilator was called, but it just made her heart just beat, 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 beat real fast. She was on 100% oxygen, and we had the first doctor we had in the NICU. They referred to her as Dr. Doom. So unfortunately, she had to give us the news, her status, and she was very, very sick for the first several weeks in the NICU. We found out within 72 hours that she had grade 4 bilateral brain bleeds, which was devastating news. When the babies are born that early, their ventricles and vessels in their brains are just so paper thin because they didn't have the time that they needed to develop inside, that they said anything from changing the diaper to the delivery to her even just laying there, the vessels could just pop, and something happened within the first 72 hours that caused that to happen to our baby on both sides, and they were classified as grade 4, which is the biggest that they could be. So, of course, we're told at this point that she is expected to have major, major delays. I think that they said there was a 60 or 70% chance of survival rate. And it was just a waiting game. That's one thing we've learned in this whole journey, is that it's just hurry up and wait. We just have to wait for her. We have to wait to see how she is going to proceed with all of these things. And we just have to give her the time she needs to heal. So that was our major first, I would say, roadblock or road speed bump that we had in the NICU. It was probably the scariest news I feel like we've got the entire time that we were there. We also found out that she had what was called a PDA, which they say was very, very common in the preemie babies, and they gave her Motrin at first to try to close it, and it didn't work. So then they tried to give her a round of Tylenol, and praise the Lord, that did work, because she didn't have to have any type of heart surgery. She didn't quite completely close, because once we left the NICU, we did have to see the cardiologist twice, but we have been told that her PDA has been completely closed and that she does not need to be followed by her cardiologist anymore. So 1 month into our NICU stay, they bring down the neurosurgeon because her brain is getting bigger. Her fontanelles are starting to come apart, and her soft spot is starting to bulge, which means that the pressure in the brain is not getting any better. They're doing weekly ultrasounds of her brain. It's not correcting itself, so they have to bring in a neurosurgeon. And at that point, they decide to give her what is called the reservoir. It's kind of like a shunt, but not. They went in and they lifted up the top part of her brain, her skull, and put this reservoir inside. And then for 7 days, they would come in with needles and they would drain the fluid off of her brain to give her relief in the head. So at 1 month old, exactly, our baby was taken in for her first brain surgery. She came through it with flying colors. They tapped her brain 7 times, once a day for the first week. And honestly feel like that was probably the turning point for her, because after that everything seemed to just improve, and I think it was the relief from the pressure on her brain that allowed her body to start to take care of the rest of the problems that she was having.
And at that point, they were just going to keep watching and tap again if they needed to. And then if she were still getting tapped when she got discharged, they would go back in and put a shunt. So thankfully, she never needed any more taps after that 7 days. So whatever was going on with the bleeding, it was correcting itself. There was just no place for the excess material. Just imagine there's so much space in there, and then she's been bleeding into it. And the blood can, for lack of a better way to put it, coagulate in that space and cause drainage problems and whatnot. So they had to go in and get that excess material out, which is what they did. Now at this point, especially that first couple of weeks, we really didn't even get to hold her, touch her. We got to maybe touch her.
My first hold was at 2 weeks.
Yeah. But still, that first 2 weeks, we got to maybe put like a hand on her. And then at 2 weeks, it was like, that's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. But she was still, so she had sensors on her, she had the feeding tube, she was intubated, and they also had to put the little glasses on her.
Jaundice. She had to be under the lights for jaundice.
Yeah. So it was pretty rough. I think the hardest part was really that nobody else could come up there. Mm-hmm. Because the hospital had a 2 visitors only policy.
It was a mom and dad policy. It wasn't even visitors. The policy for the visitors was due to COVID, which you understand because you don't want your baby to get sick. But even the first week, I was in the hospital, I think, for 5 days. And my mom, who I'm very, very close with, came and stayed one night with me so that Mike could come home and be with our other 2 children throughout the night. And I just even asked, please, can my mom come? You know, like, she's already in the hospital, but they just wouldn't allow it. And of course, we would have loved for all of our family to be able to come up and show support and love on our baby. But it just wasn't the rules, and we had to obey by them. And so all our family, we were able to FaceTime so the kids could see her through video chat, and then pictures, of course. But sometimes when you have a sick child or you have a sick family member, you just want people to come and help you. But it was the time we're in. Fortunately, I don't think the hospital still has that policy for the people that are there now.
Yeah, that might have changed a little bit.
But going back to her NICU stay, I really feel that after that shunt surgery that we had and they got the fluid off her brain, she did a complete turnaround. She was able to get extubated. She was intubated for the first 4 weeks. She was very particular about not liking those tubes, though, because there were a couple of times she extubated herself, but unfortunately she wasn't strong enough to stay off, so she had to get re-intubated those 2 times. But after, like, I think the week after this brain surgery, we got extubated permanently. I wouldn't say permanently, but until our next surgery. So we had several weeks with her without any tubes except for her feeding tube, which was very nice.
Yeah, she didn't get to start trying to do a bottle until, what, about 3 months?
No, I was like, I think 36 weeks is when they let them try the bottles. So maybe closer to 2 months.
Yeah.
But then we come to find out after we get past the brain surgery, we have our ROP screening, which is retinopathy of prematurity. And again, of course, we're told this is very, very common in premature babies because their eyes don't fully develop and the vessels in their eyes aren't forming the correct way, and they have this surgery that's a laser surgery that's on a bedside. It's very, very easy. And so
Easy.
yeah, we come to find out it was not very easy for our girl. But one eye was, I think, already at stage 4 or 3.
Yeah.
Whenever we decided to have the surgery, and the other eye was on its way to being there, so we elected just to have the laser surgery on both eyes at the time so we wouldn't have to go through 2 surgeries. And this was around 2 months, so we've been there for about 8 weeks now. She had just started to take her bottle, some of her feedings by bottle, because of course they don't give them all their feedings by bottle at first. We were making great strides at this time. We were on the bottle. We were out of the incubator. The incubator. We were in open air cribs. We could just walk in and hold her. We didn't have to have help.
Got to put clothes on her.
Oh yeah, she got to wear her first outfit before she was moved. But then we had the surgery, and with any surgery there's risk. And of course the doctor told us that there's a chance she'd have to be intubated. They would do their best to keep her from being intubated, but they made no promises. And our girl had real troubles with the medicine they gave her to sedate her for the surgery. And I don't know if she got too much or exactly what happened, but she started struggling breathing, and so they had to give her Narcan to reverse the drugs. They had to give it to her 3 times, and then once they finally could get her to where she was responding good, they got her intubated again, and they were able to finish the surgery. The eye surgery was a success, but of course it makes you just take 1 step forward and 3 steps back to be back in the intubation stages. and we had to stop the bottle feedings because she wasn't waking up. And they started giving her caffeine again to try to get her more energy to wake up. And then that night, when one of our night nurses was, I guess, coming in and taking over the shift and just looking over everything, I'm not sure exactly what happened. We were there, but it happened so fast. The ventilator came unhooked. So as we sat there and watched our baby go from 100% oxygen to 80% to 70 to 60, all the machines are beeping, 40, 30, 20. You look at her, she's turning purple, she's turning blue, they're going code red, and all the doctors run in, and again, thank God, they saved her, and they got her machines back on. But what was supposed to be an easy surgery, obviously in the NICU, nothing is easy, and nothing is as it should be, no matter how the doctors and nurses try, because they do. I have to say, by far, that was the hardest day of my NICU stay, was to watch my baby turn purple and blue right in front of our eyes.
But she made it.
She did make it. And I think it was 2 or 3 days before we could hold her again because she wasn't waking up from the sedative. She was starting to show more signs the next day, like when they gave her caffeine, and she was starting to kind of wiggle her toes and come awake. But they still didn't let us hold her for a couple days, which was hard also because your baby's had surgery, she's almost died, and you have to just sit there and just watch her. But I think we were intubated again for a week or so. Maybe 5 or 7 days.
I think it might have been closer to 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't.
Because they were really slow about trying to get her off.
Well, they said that she was. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but it's where she was trying to get the tubes out herself because she didn't want them in, and she started to almost rely on them too much, to where she wasn't wanting to do it on her own because she was becoming reliant on the machines again. But
not because she couldn't, and that's where the problem came from, because they would test her and her breathing would go down, but it's because she was letting the breathing tube do the work. When they actually pulled the trigger and took it out, she breathed fine. But every time they just tried to lower it, she was like, she would drop.
In the NICU, it's really, really a fine line because you know those doctors are the best. That's why they're there, and they do it every day. But it's also, you're her parent, and you're with her every day. And it's hard to know when you should be the advocate and say, no, this is what she needs, versus like, oh, well, you're the doctor. You know what's best for her because you're the professional and I'm not. But I've also learned through this process that nobody knows your child like you do. And while they are the experts and they have the best at heart, sometimes you just have to say, wait a minute, why are you doing this? I don't think this is what she needs. And the doctors at OU Children's were phenomenal. And the nurses we had there, we would not have made it without the nurses. They did photo shoots with her. They made her bikinis when she had to be on the vagina slides. They came and visited her when she wasn't on their shift, and they would leave her notes. And they put notes in the cameras for us. Like, I don't think this was a process we could have gone through without the nurses. And we even have followed some of them on Facebook now, and they check on her. And anytime we're ever back there, we try to stop by and say hi. But they told us not to expect Talley to come home until she was at minimum 40 weeks gestational. probably more like 42 because of how early she was and the struggles we had. But our little fighter proved them wrong. And she came home at, I would say, 38 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
38 weeks gestational. She got moved from the full-time NICU unit to the where the parents can sleep in, stay, and they don't get monitored all the time. And I think we were there for a couple of days. And of course, at the very end, the frustration sits in because they say, "Oh, she can go home," and then they're like, "Oh, but this doctor wants to run this test," or "Oh, this doctor wants to run this test." But it's all for the best because the day that they were going to send her home, we lost power, and she had to come home on oxygen. So it wouldn't have worked out that day anyway. So clearly, that was for the best. But she did come home, and she's been home ever since. We've had one more trip to the emergency room just for slight pneumonia, which we didn't stay. We just got a breathing treatment and came home. We had our year visit with the NICU clinic, and we saw one of our primary NICU doctors that day, and he was just floored and astonished by how well she's doing. She's crawling all over the place. She's starting to pull up, and she'll be 1 year adjusted on the 21st. So while she's still not 100% where a 1-year-old should be, all of our tests came back in the average, some low average, but we couldn't expect any more from that sweet angel that we have whenever we were told to expect major delays, that she might not survive, she might not do this, she might not do that. And looking back and talking to other people, I know that they have to tell you the worst case scenario because they have to prepare you for that, because that is definitely a scenario or an option that could have happened to our sweet girl. And we still don't have 100% certainty what's going to happen. And that's the hardest part for me as the mom, is I want to know now. I want to know what challenges my child are going to face. I want to know what I can do to accommodate her. And we've done what we've been told. She's in physical therapy, and occupational therapy. She was going every Monday. They've just recently switched her to every other Monday, which the neurosurgeon, she was very, very happy with that. She said that is a huge accomplishment for her that they're cutting back on her therapies. We just saw her on Friday, had our last MRI scan, and she said Talley is looking perfect. She said that her head is just going to be on the big side, which our 3-year-old son has no brain bleeds, and he's in the 97th percentile. So we just have big-headed children, which is fine. And of course, throughout the NICU, we had more ups and downs and hard days and good days, but I feel like our 2 major days were the brain surgery and the eye surgery. And overall, we have an older daughter who is not my daughter biologically but adopted, and then we have a son who just turned 3, and his pregnancy was smooth sailing, his delivery was smooth sailing. Like, we were not prepared for this at all. We had no signs of high blood pressure. We had no signs of any idea that we were going to have an early premature.
Even Talley's pregnancy was smooth.
Everything was perfect up until that day. I wouldn't say till that day. That weekend before, I had started having some discharge of some type. And I did message my doctor's office, and they told me that it was probably just vaginal discharge because I was only 24 weeks pregnant at that time. So, I mean, of course, as the mom, I go back on myself and I think, I should have went to the doctor. I should have got checked out.
That's a side note. If you think it's not what they said, go.
Yeah.
Waste their time.
I mean, they're going to get paid whether or not, and your insurance is going to pay them. So if
they're going to bill you every time they look, but
yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I could say on my part is that I probably should have went in whenever I first had that discharge, but I did message my doctor and I took her office's advice and I didn't do anything. But
would it have made a difference? I don't know.
I don't know. All I know is that this little girl has taught me that it doesn't matter how small you are mighty in strength and mighty in heart. And she is the happiest baby I have ever been around. And I'm not just saying that because she's our baby, because we have a son too, and he's a Spitfire. But very rarely does she have a bad day. And
she goes toe to toe with him.
Yeah, and she will never have memories of what her life started out as, just what we can tell her and show her in the memory box that we've made for her. But she's gone from a micro preemie to a 1-year-old who will sit there and feed herself for 30 minutes if we let her. She is an eater, and I think her next big step is going to be walking in her time. I have a hard time sometimes remembering that she's on her time. Mike tells me all the time, it's not a baby race, in the words of Bluey. But, Bluey's mom, Bluey's dad. But it's hard sometimes still not to compare your baby to babies that were born at the same time as her, or babies that were born at the same due date she had, and she's not doing what they are doing. But she's doing her own thing. And she's striving at it, and she's amazing. And I guess this is just our backstory of our sweet girl. This is, I guess, where we start.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody will want to listen to us or hear what we have to say, but
I think her next milestone is going to be punching brother in the face.
Yeah, I just keep saying when she gets up and walks, she's going to take him out because he gets her all the time. But we are blessed to have her, and while she didn't come the way we expected, or she didn't have the entry into the world we all look up to and think this is what's going to happen, she had her own entry, and she has her own story, and she's doing pretty good at it right now. So
we'll be making some more of these soon. Happy to take questions, share stories, ours and other people's stories as well. There's not a lot of... All the stuff you see online is negative. They talk about when things go wrong, which is important, but it's important to hear the things that go right too.
I know, like, I remember one of our nurses, which is the one we still keep in touch with, I was talking to her about stuff I see in the Facebook groups, and not that they're not good sources, because they are very, very good sources, and I love the one I had been in when we were in the NICU, but she said a lot of times you only see the negative posts, or the people that are having the hardest times. And thankfully we were not one of those people that had to post those kind of posts, and we did have our hard days. That's without saying it was almost every day was a hard day, but we got through it. And
we still had her on oxygen for like 2 months at home. That was hard.
Yeah, we're not medical experts. We don't know. But and they don't give you a lot of... I mean, it's just like when you bring your full-term baby home, you don't get an instruction manual. You don't get an instruction manual with your preemie that's on oxygen and she starts choking on her bottle. You just have to kind of take care of, like, your baby, and your parent instincts come in.
Yeah. Or are her feet blue because they're cold?
Yeah.
Or is she not getting enough oxygen? I don't know. There were actually discussions back and forth. Should we start to wean her? Should we not start to wean her? You know.
Well, they don't really... I mean, when we went to the NICU clinic, maybe like a month after we were discharged, is when we finally got some type of instructions on how to wean her. We were just sent home on oxygen.
And they're just like, whatever you think.
And we have different ideas of what we think are okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more
they
conservative.
tested her, and they were like, she's oxygenating fine. If you want a wiener, you can. And we're just like, I'm like, let's do it. And she's like,
I'm a little bit more reserved, yes. I mean,
yep. And I was like, just push her. She can do it. The dad difference, I guess.
well, I just hope that if anybody wants to listen to us, or if anybody needs hope while they're in the same situation we were in, that there are light at the end of the tunnel. We had, I think, 3 different roommates while we were in the NICU. And unfortunately, we don't get to keep up with them. But you meet people, you meet other babies, and the NICU babies are without a doubt warriors. And they go through more than a lot of people ever go through in their lifetime. And I have forever found a new spot in my heart for those nurses and those doctors and
Definitely.
all the people that take care of the babies. Because our baby wouldn't have made it without them. So.
And since this started, we both met so many people who were a preemie, or know somebody who was a preemie, or they've got preemie stories to share. Their adult kids were preemies.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people have premature babies, or babies that are just born with some type of illness, and you don't know until you're in that situation, and then they come forward to give you support, or to give you advice, or just to say, hey, we got through it, you're going to get through it. So.
And Talley's been kind of documented on Twitter as we've gone along. So a lot of people have shared in her journey. And I've met a lot of people there also who had their own preemies or were preemies themselves. And it's just amazing. They grow up to be great. They achieve, they accomplish, can't even tell. They're like football players, whatever.
Well, a little backstory, like, for her name, on my side of the family, we had only had boys. We didn't have a girl until I married Mike, and we got our oldest daughter that I adopted. So when we found out we were pregnant with Talley, it was almost like
I called it
unreal. Like, my side of the family does not have girls. I know they say the guy determines the sex, but I just thought it was not possible for me to have a girl.
Your sister had 2 boys. Her brother had 2 boys. We already had 1 boy together. And we found out we were pregnant. I said, this is a girl.
And I said, absolutely no way. We do not have girls. But, so my sister always wanted to use the name Talley for her, but she never had a girl. And so it is actually my great-grandmother's maiden name. And she was one of the best women that I ever knew. So I just feel like it was fitting that we end up using that name for our baby girl. And the struggles that she's had, I think she's just going to be as strong as my great-grandma, which is also my grandma's mother. And so she just has, that name has so much meaning and so much backbones and so much strength and so much courage, and it couldn't be more fitting for what life she's been given so far.
And I got Miles. So I said, whatever you want, do it.
That's because you tricked me.
Yeah. She swears I didn't tell her that Miles is a Star Trek character or a Spider-Man.
I specifically said we will not name our child after a superhero, and then after I said yes to Miles, there's a spider named Miles, but that's a whole other story.
So I owed that.
So Talley is named after my great-grandmother and my sister, and they're all just a bunch of Spitfire women on my side, so she's got a lot going behind her. Mm-hmm. And her grandma on Mike's side is just a bunch of a Spitfire.
Yeah.
She's got a lot
her
of
side are feisty, and my side is stubborn. So we just want to try and share some of the positives and some of the challenges that we've had. Anybody who's got a question they'd like us to answer, we're happy to do that. If you've got a story you want to share, we're happy to do that too. If it's your story, your baby, somebody you know, even if it's you, if you've heard all the stories about you.
Yeah, I mean, the stories are great. I mean, we love to hear all the positive outcomes, sometimes not so positive outcomes. Everyone has their own unique journey, their own stories to tell. And we hope that our story can help with someone. It's going to be a journey probably for the rest of our lives, the rest of her lives, but it's a journey that we're going to take head on.
It's not just her challenges, it's ours too. Because we've had to work together, make sure that we were communicating with each other. Sometimes relationships don't survive stressful situations like this. It happens. And we've had to deal with it. It sometimes feels like just a constant PTSD kind of fight or flight reaction. Every time something happens, you're like, what's wrong now? Is something wrong? I don't know. We won't even get any diagnosis of anything that might happen later until she's at least 2. So we still don't know. It's a constant state of wait and see. And that's hard.
It's the hardest part of it all. So
the first 6 months especially, people would be like, is she going to be okay? Or like, I don't know. Hope so.
yeah, and off topic, I mean, everyone always wants to say, oh, she's going to be okay. Or, oh, she looks just fine. Or, oh, she's not going to be there that long. They tell you that she's not going to be there that long. Those are hard days too, because until you see her, until you experience it, it's easy just to see a picture and say, oh, she's just fine. Or, oh, she's not going to be in there for 3+ months. She's going to be out in 2 months, when we know that that's not a possibility, but they don't. And I know that they're just trying to offer you words of hope and words of encouragement. And sometimes those are the hardest words that we got.
Mm-hmm. Or even when we were still in the hospital. Every day was somebody saying, how's she doing? It's like, I don't know. Same as yesterday. So it's not easy. I don't want to compare it to what she's had to go through, but we have to be there for her. We have to be there for the other kids, and you have to remember to be there for each other too.
It's really easy for us to put ourselves on the back burners to make sure that the kids are taken care of.
Yeah.
But even like my mom has always told me, you have to take care of yourself too, because if we don't take care of ourselves, who's going to take care of the little ones?
Basically, we spent that entire summer at the hospital. One of us was up there every day. Mm-hmm. And nobody else could go up there. So it was just me or her. That would have been pretty nice too, if your mom could have gone up there and sat with her.
Oh, yeah. Then she would have never... If somebody else had been up there, she would have never had a moment when she was by herself, because we have so much family.
Yeah.
So.
That's going to be a wrap for episode 1.
Yeah.
You got to get the backstory out. The first episode is always the worst. So we can only hope they get better. And maybe somebody will watch.
Time, so hopefully... We don't know what we're doing either on these podcasts. So.
No, we don't. So it's a work in progress, as are the kids. So, but until next time, like I said, if you want to share a story, ask a question. You can comment on here. You can message us on the YouTube channel. And some of you may know where to find me on Twitter. You can send me a message there too. So please let us know what you think. Like or subscribe, I guess. Is that how this works?
Sound like Nevaeh.
I don't know.
All right, well, it's past this mama's bedtime, so until next time.
Yes, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us for Team Tally.
Yeah.